Hello again and welcome to I've Got a Beatles podcast with Dave and Chris. And today we're going to go into the lab for an interesting song that surprisingly we've never actually talked about in much detail. And
hmm
we to go along with the all the hoopla about the 60th anniversary of the Beatles coming to America with the upcoming release of the US albums and such. We thought we'd get in on the fun with a look at a song that, well, I had a teacher once who said if the Beatles did no other songs except for this one, they would still be remembered. And that is I Want to Hold Your Hand. So, what,
Esquire music critic David Newman wrote about I Want to Hold Your Hand. Terrible, awful. It's the bunk. The Beatles are indistinguishable from 100 other similar loud and twanging rock and roll groups. They aren't talented singers as Elvis was. They aren't fun as Elvis was. They aren't anything. So I
well,
guess
what
we've been wrong for
I
60
guess,
years.
yeah, what happened to David Newman after that? Talk about being wrong. I mean, wow. Wow. Yeah, this song, I think many people have written books and long pieces and articles and stuff about it because it
hmm
made that much of an impact.
Yeah.
And and as you pointed out, you sent me a list of just, I'm sure, a fraction of some of the cover versions that we'll talk about later. It's
Yeah.
been covered a lot and a lot of talk about this particular song. So
hmm
what was your opinion, before, as we like to do when we talk about these songs, what was your opinion pre-researching all week on I Want to Hold Your Hand? What did you think of the tune?
Well, I'm more of a mid and late Beatles guy. I'm not like super crazy excited about the early Beatles stuff sometimes. But when we dig deep into the tunes and when we really listen to them and analyze them with a fresh eyes, boy, this one sounds great. And
Yeah.
this one's an amazingly constructed song with a lot to talk about musically and maybe less so lyrically, but still lots and lots to dig into. And many other Beatles songs that are very good songs aren't covered as much as this one is. So and sometimes I like to look at, well, how much was this song covered instrumentally? And there's many great just instrumental covers from it, and I think that says something about the melody and the chord progression and all of that, which makes it interesting as well.
The question that we'll want to think about, and I'll ask you after we've talked about it, is what Ian MacDonald says in Revolution in the Head. He says that this is primarily a hit record, that
hmm
it makes less sense considered as a song because it's more about the sound and the hype and the hoopla and everything about it. It's not about the song as much. And so we'll dig into that. I don't want your opinion yet. We'll I don't want to know what you think. We'll talk about it first, but that's an opinion. Then he goes on for 2 pages explaining why that's the case. So who knows? But in any case, it was immensely successful, and it was the song that I think more than any other really put them on the map in America. And it's the song that you think of and you see when you think of
Yeah,
the Ed Sullivan
yeah.
show. It's them singing this song.
In
So,
England, of course, they had singles out and people knew about them and stuff like that, and then I'm sure when this came out in England, it was like, oh yeah, amazing. But
yeah.
they'd already had some hits. Not here. This was the first one. This was the big one. This was the in Record Store Day, Black Friday coming up here. The day after Thanksgiving, you can buy the single if you wait in very long line. Get there
Yeah.
early so that you can wait on in a long line and still maybe not get it, but that's my experience with Record Store Day. But anyway, yeah, it's the landmark thing that denotes the arrival of Beatlemania and the electric shock change nationwide here in the US of what would be known as the British invasion, obviously. So
Yes.
on the stature of it alone makes it an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
Beatlemania, kind of
Yeah.
distilled into about 2 minutes and 25 seconds. So before we get into it, here's some demographic info, as we always do too. Recorded on October 7th, 1963. And
Mhm.
you mentioned earlier that it still sounds good. And I think that's because it was the first song the Beatles recorded on a four-track
Yeah.
recorder, along with This Boy.
They
So
had to do it so I could overdub those sweet, sweet
uh,
hand claps.
I was, oh, you scooped me here. I was ready to ask you about your favorite. You love those hand claps, so
Yeah.
was ready to get onto that. Uh, but but yes, this was a four-track recording. Yeah, so it was then released. So after that recording, they did 17 takes of it. Came off pretty quickly.
Mhm.
George Martin mixed it a few days later. Released November 29th, 1963 in the UK. And then about a month later in the US. So it actually came out in 63, but didn't really take until a little bit after that.
Mm.
And then eventually became number one for 7 weeks after it was released, starting February 1st, which happened to time very well with the Ed Sullivan show, which was the next week. So
Yeah.
really having 7 weeks of this. It was stuck. It couldn't get to number one because She Loves You was already there. So it
Yeah.
was just so much going on. It
Yeah.
still remains the most sold Beatles single of 12 million copies.
Mhm.
And so just a tremendous success. So
Yeah.
I think that alone makes sure that it's going to last.
In the Playboy interview, the famous 1980 September 1980 Lennon Playboy interview, what do you think? Do you think he crapped all over this?
He probably
Let's
said it was rubbish. Yeah.
Here we go.
Okay.
We wrote a lot of stuff together, one-on-one, eyeball to eyeball. Like in I Want to Hold Your Hand. I remember when we got the chord that made the song. We were in Jane Asher's house downstairs in the cellar playing on the piano at the same time. And we had, oh, you got that something. And Paul hits this chord, and I turn to him and I say, that's it. I said, do that again. In those days, we really used to absolutely write like that, both playing into each other's noses. So he
Yeah.
didn't say anything crappy about it for a change.
No, no. And then according to the Revolution in the Head, there was a point where Lennon wanted to make a remake of the song instrumentally solo, that he loved it that much. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't rubbish, it wasn't Paul's
Yeah.
throwaway, it wasn't a junk lyric. Yeah, he was very positive. And then Paul would reiterate that, yeah, that was really an eyeball to eyeball song, and we wrote that together completely.
Now, Paul said, and this is Paul from the lyrics, there was an eroticism behind it all. I want to hold your hand and probably do a lot more. He says it was not written about Jane Asher, but writing just to a more general audience. So that's
Mm,
the gist of the
yeah,
lyrics. You know how he just rambles on. But
right.
yeah, so there's a little bit about the origins
Yeah,
of the writing of it. I think one of the most interesting things about it musically is there's no lead singer.
right.
A total co-performance. They harmonize it in parts, but they both sing every word of the song together. So it's like not too long after this, it's like, oh, that's John's song, oh, that's Paul's song, oh, that's John's, that's Paul's. This one, it's both of them. So
Yeah,
that's another reason why it's so special, I think.
it is. And you can see that in the Ed Sullivan performance, although I read that John's microphone was turned very low for that song for some reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see them both singing together. And I will say, I think that harmony that they do is some of
Mhm.
the most special parts of it, especially in the second bridge, is
Yeah.
really fantastic. So it really, it's hard to get a more like a real true Lennon McCartney song than this one.
Yeah. The opening of the song, such a massive burst of energy,
Yeah.
right off the top, and it's the end of the bridge that opens the song, dun dun dun,
Yeah.
which turns into "I Can't Hide"
Mm-hmm.
later in the song. So that's really something else. Also, I think the great moment in the melody where right before they go into the chorus, where they've been singing in unison, and then he goes up. I think John goes up a fifth
Mm-hmm.
on the harmony, so it's like, whoa, there's harmony now.
Yeah. 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 It's a great arrangement of things too. So
Yeah,
you have a lot of, I mean, we might as well just get into the music, some of the fun musical elements here. I
yeah.
was struck by a couple things. One, I've always loved the that harmony. The song's a very straightforward 32 bar AABA kind of straightforward song, popular song form. So not anything unusual, but the harmonies on that second bridge are
Mm-hmm.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Of course, the guitar lick, the answering guitar lick, really stands out. The do 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 that
Well,
George played.
yeah, yeah. And then of course the little, I mean, George does some just interesting stuff. These little bends.
Yeah, little
So it's like
fills.
right before the I think you'll
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that. Otherwise, George is kind of straightforward, and he doesn't take like a long solo or anything like that
no,
in
no,
there. It's John's rhythm part. I really think that's the fascinating if you dig into what he actually plays. He plays a little bit of that rock and rolly thing where it's dun 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 dun
yeah,
dun 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 dun.
yeah.
But the chords he's playing in a couple spots are like those what they call his banjo chords, where
Hmm.
he pops that pinky up onto a weird
Yeah, yeah.
note. And then there's some odd choices. I watched a video from Mike Pacelli
Oh yeah, yeah.
online, who will walk you through the entire chord progression of this, and I think it's a fascinating watch. So give that a look. But he talked about like, well, he's here, he plays this D, and you would think he'd play just open G at that point, but instead he pops up to the weirder, harder to
Hmm.
get to G chord. But it all works really,
Yeah,
famously, I think.
it does. And something else that works really famously that you might not expect is Ringo. He, and especially on the 2023 remix on the Red album that came out last year,
Hmm.
the drum
Oh, the
fills.
painting over the
Yeah,
uh
painting over the Mona Lisa, or
Mona
what was that?
Lisa or whatever. Rembrandt, I
Yeah,
think.
the Rembrandt. That's
So
right.
it's like,
Yeah.
anyway.
No, you can hear Ringo's fills a lot better, and
Hmm.
he just has a propulsion of pushing things forward. And part of it, listen carefully, but on the bridge he goes from the ride cymbal, which is the really splashy, and then he
Yeah.
goes to the hi-hat, and it just is like it's such a drastic
Yeah.
change that you focus on the vocals at that point.
Yeah. It sort of quiets everything
Yes,
down right at the
quiets it
beginning of
down.
the bridge, like I'm night.
Yeah, yeah, it's
So
so effective.
yeah.
Ringo's playing on this, and then obviously the ending is really cool too with the "I want to hold your hand, I want to hold your hand, I
Yeah.
want to hold your
Bum, 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 bum,
hand."
bum.
Bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah, the triplets at the end.
So
So it really is a pretty polished little song for the early days. That's very
yeah.
effective.
Yeah. And then Paul talking lyrics wise, it's pretty straightforward. I mean,
Yeah.
a cute, sweet song you can play to kids. But it's got that underlying layer, like Paul said. There's a little bit of like, I want to hold your hand,
Edge.
um, but I find the phrase I think you'll understand. Interesting in there. It's something about that of a like there's a connection. That phrase is saying, okay, there's definitely a connection between us here.
Right, right. And it's part of those that the way the Beatles in those early songs, and Paul has talked about this a lot, but how they spoke to the female listener, to the girl listening. It was kind of a
Yeah.
direct singing, unlike maybe the Rolling Stones or somebody else. But thank you, girl,
Yeah.
from me to you. It's very direct, and this is a very, yeah, like you said, very much so. So McDonald says. The words to "I Want to Hold Your Hand" were heard as a token of the group's social acceptability. Where the Rolling Stones dealt in sex, the Beatles supposedly respected propriety, knowing how far a young man should go with a young woman and how far a pop group could trespass without causing offense. This was true to the extent that Brian Epstein had carefully sweetened the Beatles' image for public consumption.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I sure.
sure.
However, by not going too far, especially in 1963, look at the results.
Right, right.
Girls screaming their heads off because it's like, oh, it's sort of, oh, he wants to touch my hand.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think you'll understand. They understood what that meant, what that led to. you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well,
So
should we talk about it
lyrics.
now? Now, for us, I think the lyrics are pretty straightforward, but there's another famous rock musician songwriter who didn't think it was he didn't quite he missed the meaning and thought that the Beatles were singing I get high." Do you think Bob Dylan he said he asked John Lennon, "What's that song that goes you I get high?" And John said, "No, those
Yeah.
aren't the lyrics. Actually, it's
Yeah.
I can't hide." So
Yeah.
I guess that goes into misheard, like
Yeah. It's
"Excuse me
like
while I kiss the sky,
yeah.
Purple Haze."
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, there's, tons of just Beatles versions of this out there. So you get the original mono, you got the stereo, remastered 2009, remastered 2015. Remember, because it was on one.
Oh, that's right.
And of course, the new mix just last year that was on red, the new stereo mix, which is very good, I think.
And
Then you got, yeah,
can I ask you about that actually? The fact that this song appears on with the US, before I forget about it, this appears on Meet the Beatles. And
hmm
whereas it didn't appear on With the Beatles. And
yeah.
yeah, we know it was the Dave Dexterized version and the sound of it, but does that not make Meet the Beatles a more valuable album in some ways? That this song at that time, it was great marketing and the sound of it. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, except for that thing of they probably had the single already.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
People would have
That's right.
probably already rushed out and bought the single,
Yeah.
considering it was such a big hit. So I
Hmm.
don't know. But
Yeah.
sometimes though, I think, sometimes you want, oh, I like this group. I want just an album that doesn't have any singles on it. But sometimes if you're not, you're trying to get new people who haven't bought the single, sometimes having the big single on the record might sell more records. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's a hard question to answer. But I personally prefer the, you know, English,
Yeah.
where it's like there's the singles and then there's the records and they're separate.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes
Yeah,
sense.
rather than this American where also they snip off two songs on the American records.
Yeah, yeah.
We also have the Anthology 1 version, which is kind of you said there's so many takes of this. What?
There were 17 takes.
17 takes. None of
Yeah.
those takes are on Anthology.
No, no.
So I wonder if we might hear one or two of those at some point on some sort of box set or something. I don't know, something
Yeah.
coming out at some
I've never
point.
I've
Uh,
never heard an alternate version of it, so
yeah,
I don't know.
the Anthology 1 version is kind of a rough live version from December 2nd, 1963, from the Morecombe and Wise show. That was the one where they also sang Moonlight Bay, I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so maybe this one's definitely due for that new technology to clean it up, because it's rough sounding on the Anthology 1. And then you got the Love version, which is just a mix of the regular song straight up
Yeah.
with crowd noise for no good reason, just because it fits in Love's storyline there. And then live at the BBC for the Beatles Say From Us to You, from December 26, 1963. Extremely close to the record. Maybe George's guitar is a little more prominent on that one, and some nice little licks in the second verse there. Maybe a tidge out of tune as well. So, but of course, everybody's favorite version. I know it's your favorite version as much as you travel overseas. Come give mer Dinah hand.
Yes, yes, we have to talk about this. This is one of the only two foreign language Beatles songs, the other one being Sie liebt dich. And it's
Yeah,
a funny story how they did the German version because Brian Epstein was worried that, and the Odeon, the German label, was worried that the Beatles would have to sing in a different language, and they thought, well, they were in Germany, so they can sing it in German. So it was translated for them, and but they didn't want to do it. So they were on
yeah,
tour in Paris and refused, and then a couple days later kind of broke down and did it January 29th, 1964. And so they did record Komm gib mir deine Hand. And
yeah.
what do you think of the of course the rest of the music is the same, but the words are in German. So what do you think?
Yeah, it's a weird curiosity. It's just very, very
Yeah,
strange, and the only time they'd ever do something like that. And
yeah,
I mean, it's kind of like if you're German, I bet you it's like, oh, this is kind of cool.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
that we actually got a couple. Yeah, I mean, if anything, it just adds to the lore of the Beatles and Germany being sort of like you know, if America was their home away from home a little bit, Germany was also their home away from home as
Yeah.
well. So it kind of adds to that a little bit, but I don't listen to it very often.
No, I don't either. It's
I
kind of
didn't
a
even really listen to it before this one because I
no.
had so much research to do. But
It's
yeah.
a fun novelty to have.
Yeah.
Now, I'm also curious. This was released, as we mentioned, for the singles in the U.S. and the U.K. And tell me which version you think is better with the B side. So in the U.K., it
Hmm.
was "I Want to Hold Your Hand" and "This Boy,"
Oh
and
yeah.
in the U.S., it was "I Want to Hold Your Hand" and "I Saw Her Standing There."
Ooh.
Ooh.
I think this boy is a better B-side, really, to be honest.
Mm. Hmm.
So, ooh, that's
I
tough.
know.
Tough
It's a
call
tough
though.
call. Yeah. But the hand claps, you got hand claps on both of the US
Oh, that's
songs.
right.
So
Yep. Yep.
yeah.
Oh, and then of course, Ed Sullivan, obviously.
Yep.
They played it on Ed Sullivan. I'm trying to see how many times they played it live. Kind of
Oh, I bet a lot.
hard to. Oh, and of course there's a live at the Hollywood Bowl version.
Yes, that's
And that
right.
one's interesting. It's a little different. It sounds like really hot. Like
Yeah.
really like energetic.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So just huge. And
yeah.
I don't think there's too much else to say apart from, yeah, I'll come back to us before we get to our patented cover versions. And
Mhm.
uh, so is this a record? Is this more of a record or is it
I don't
a
even
song?
really get what he's talking about. It's like, who cares?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what he says.
But
He
yeah.
said, here's one sentence that tells you the real reason for the group's lyric blandness at this stage was that they didn't care much what words they sang as long as they fitted the overall sound. It was the record rather than the song that interested them.
Okay, but isn't the very interesting, unique melody and chord progression and those. We talked about a little bit about the music, but maybe you could talk a little bit about the chord progression because there's some funky chords in there, aren't there?
Yeah, there are. Yeah, so it starts out with it starts out fine with G major, G,
Yeah,
da, 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 D, da, 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 going to E minor, and then it's the next chord. I don't know if that was the one. There's been some debate. I was in my music research. There was some debate about what the chord is that John and Paul found.
yeah,
If it's the E minor, which wouldn't be that weird, or the next one, which is either a B minor or a B7,
yeah.
depending on which how you hear it. I think it's a B7, but so that
Hmm.
one is kind of weird, and it
Yeah,
does stand out because you're in G major, and if it's really a B major 7 or a B dominant seventh chord, you would not. That would be odd
yeah,
in the way it's played in the song. So it stands out, and
yeah.
yeah, and then also to the bridge too. It goes to D minor, which
Oh
is
yeah,
another
yeah.
odd choice. Yeah,
Ding.
sometimes,
And
but it works.
then,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it works somehow,
yeah,
and so it kind of breaks rules or breaks your expectations without even knowing it, and it's done so smoothly that you
yeah,
barely notice. So,
yeah. And those little details, like for instance, when they go do that harmony, it's one note before the chorus. So
right.
it sort of gives you a jump into the chorus. Similarly to the very beginning, it's the end of the bridge leading to the verse. Da 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 da. Here we are. Boom.
Yeah, yeah.
So it gives you all that extra energy of the song. So you can't just dismiss all that. Say, oh, no, it's just I don't even get
Oh
it.
no.
It's a dumb.
No. Because people aren't, even though She Loves You has some cool things like the last chord and the harmonies and stuff, it doesn't have I think this is more sophisticated, and
Yeah.
this is really kind of like, all right, they're good. They know how to write songs. They can write catchy melodies and have interesting chords and
Yeah.
just enough of a package to put it together and make it appealing to everybody. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't agree. It does have a certain hotness to it, the song, because of that, maybe because of the 4 track recording, so that the record itself does sound great. But
Yeah.
so do many others that don't have the same level of musicianship.
Exactly.
So
I mean, the other thing is, look at how many times it's covered. Just
right.
in just in 19 there's one in 1963 already from the Typhoons.
Whoa.
And then it's covered so much in 1964 and 65, both instrumental versions and vocal versions and foreign language I didn't even get around to all the foreign language versions this time because there's just too many notable cover versions. But let's talk about a few of them here.
Yes.
One is the Supremes. Okay, so I think that the Supremes wouldn't be covering this if it didn't have some harmonies.
Well,
So
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So and there's the drums are kind of hot in the Supremes one too. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
So
This was on
um
an album of all Beatle covers that they
yeah,
did.
yeah,
And it sounds like a Supreme song, kind of. It's got the same, the vocals and
yeah,
got that nice sound to it.
yeah. And then 1969. Why don't you talk about this one? Al Green.
Oh man, that this has to be up there on one of the best Beatle covers ever, especially the way it starts, because he's sort of talking like, "Oh man,
Uh,
ah,
here we go.
here we go." Yeah, it's great. It's got the funkiest sound to it, the horns. It's a great feel, and he starts doing some. Would you say they're vocal histrionics? Maybe a little bit.
Yeah, there's some guttas and
Yes,
some
got to, yeah.
yeah,
I need you. I need you. Yeah, you get some of that in there, but
yeah,
it's a great cover. I love that Al Green one.
yeah. Wonderful Al Green cover there. And then 1979, Dollar, your favorite
Yeah.
English pop vocal group, David Van Day and Teresa Bazar. They were pretty successful. They had a lot of top 10 hits, including this one. It has a really steady beat, similar to kind of like Hooked on a Feeling, kind of that
Yeah.
dun, 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 that kind of thing. Um, Lots of vocal overdubs on this. It's like David Van Day 7 times. So kind of really interesting. And then the girl sings just on the bridge. So it's
Right.
that one's pretty cool, and it's got piano. So you could see why that one was a hit. And then we got Across the Universe. Now, if
Oh yeah.
someday we'll get into how I feel about Across the Universe, but in the film Across the Universe and on the soundtrack, this is actress TV Carpio, who plays Prudence, the cheerleader who is longingly singing this. And you think at first she's singing it at a football player, but really she's singing it at another cheerleader because
Right.
she's a lesbian. So,
Well, there seems to be a theme of those because also in Glee, the TV show Glee, the
mhm,
character, uh, well, it's played by Chris Colfer. I can't remember, but he's
yeah,
one of the gay characters. He
yeah,
also sings a nice version of this too for the to his father. So, but it's
yeah,
not quite the same. But it's
yeah,
used. Yeah. But both of these versions are very. I don't want to say they're sappy, but
yeah.
they're kind of overly sweet.
Yes,
Maybe
saccharine, maybe.
saccharine. Yeah, yeah,
Um, well,
yeah.
if you don't want saccharine, how about sludge metal band the Melvins, who in 2018 played this really interesting version where they kind of play with the speed of it, and so it's like, "Oh, please say to me," and then they go dum 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 dum. Dum. So it's not like it's like they slow down parts of it as they're just like ripping into the riff. So
Hmm.
pretty good. I'm not really that into I'm not even sure what sludge metal really is,
No.
but this is definitely worth the listen, the Melvins. Okay, so that then there's some instrumental covers, and there's 3 of them here I wanted to bring up because they're so great. Takeshi Terauchi and the Blue Jeans, who I like Takeshi Terauchi, sort of a surf guitar
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in sort of the style of the Ventures and that kind of stuff. Uh, um, very cool surf kind of feeling version of this from 1964. So check that one out. And then there's a very whimsical Duke Ellington,
Yeah,
and very short too, only
yeah.
2 minutes and 5 seconds, with some trumpet wah-wahs at the beginning,
Very
and so
odd.
and then these crazy woodwind runs that are just like fascinating. So definitely check that one out.
Yeah.
And then I like the Grant Green one too.
I was gonna say that's my favorite. I'm a big Grant Green fan and love his style of guitar playing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is on an album called "I Want to Hold Your Hand," and it's a long version, but it's great, isn't it? It's like
Yeah,
stretched out, and it's got a cool feel, and yeah, you can tell that sometimes it goes away from the melody. You can't quite. And
yeah,
he's improvising, but at first it sounds yeah, just like you expect, but in a jazzy version.
yeah. I wonder if this album might have come out or is waiting to come out because it seems like all these jazz albums, including Grant Green, are coming out on these
Yeah.
pristine, direct from analog tape
Yep.
re-releases on vinyl. So that would be a good pickup, maybe.
Definitely.
Um, but that's not all, Dave. There's also a couple of, and I had to bring it up, that when a song hits such a popularity, you get novelty versions of it.
Oh
And
yeah.
there are 2 particularly funny ones. One is Gene Moss and Fred Rice. And it's called I Want to Bite Your Hand. And it's from Dracula's something where it's all Dracula singing all the songs. And he
Oh boy.
goes, and I am a thirsty vampire. I want to bite your hand. So that one's pretty funny. And then
Wow.
there's another one called I wanna hold your foot. And that's from Jeffrey Lewis and the Deposit Returners. Great name from that. And that
Great
one's from
name.
2018.
That's a recent entry.
It's a recent entry into novelty covers of Beatles songs. So
Mm,
so yeah, obviously, and there's just hundreds and hundreds more, and far too many to bring
yeah.
up. Pachulia Clark, and all these different a bunch of people you have never heard of, and then a Lakeside had a real unusual cover
Oh
version
yeah. Yeah.
too as well, and Alex Chilton played it live a few times, and so you can go on and on and on and on and on. Find a ton of covers of it, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, what do you think is the reason for so many covers? Then obviously it was such a big hit as a song, but
Yeah.
is it what you said earlier that it had to do with the the music is, it's a very catchy tune, or it's got energy, or what do you think it is? Because
Yeah, it's
there's
a mix of all that, and a little bit of the innocence of it all too. There is
yeah.
an seeing Paul say there was an eroticism to it kind of made my eyes pop out for a second, because it's considered like, you know, and obviously we leaned into the Chris Kofer and the sort
Yeah.
of saccharine version for element of that, but also sweet,
Right. Right.
and something digestible by all.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore it makes it easy for anyone of any level to be like, ooh, maybe I want to cover this.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly, like we said many times, and it put the Beatles on the map in America, and is certainly one of their most famous songs of all time. And yeah,
Yep.
people, I hear when I used to teach this song, I'd hear students say, "Oh, it's very cheesy. I want to hold your hand, and yeah, when I touch you, I feel happy inside. It's so cheesy." But you have to put it in the context of the times and
Yeah.
realize that they were, as we've said, they were getting at more than what they said,
Yeah.
and still they're able to do it in a way that's just so irresistibly catchy.
And so I'm sure they'll talk about it in the upcoming Beatles Disney Plus documentary, and any documentary about 1964 is gonna
Oh
is gonna
yeah,
mention this landmark moment. Of course,
yeah,
just days after John F. Kennedy shot, and the Beatles show up, and so
right. This is interesting. We as we close, we actually don't have a lot of news.
yeah,
Unlike the last couple episodes.
yeah, we're just awaiting days from now the release of the George set for Living in the Material World. So that should be a really valuable listening experience with
Yeah.
all of the bonus tracks and the remix of from, I think that's a Paul Hicks remix,
Yep.
if I'm
Yep.
correct. So looking forward to that. I'm gonna clear my Friday schedule to
Yes. Yeah.
give
We're
it
all.
quite a listen. So we'll do that for sure. Do we have feedback in our Please Mr. Postman segment?
Yes, we do. We're glad to hear from Nick, who said, "I enjoyed the Jim Keltner Beatle Friend episode. Unless I missed it, you didn't mention a significant Beatle contribution.
Mm,
Keltner was a member of the first All-Star Band in 1989 to 90. That
that's
is the
true.
Yeah, that is the one time I saw him, although I paid more attention to Ringo and the other huge stars on that tour." Nick. So,
Pretty good. Pretty good.
yeah.
Obviously, we've big mistake on our part
Yeah,
not
so
mentioning that.
thanks.
But yeah, that's really, I mean, very much significant. And way, if the All Star Band had flopped or something,
Oh,
then what would Ringo be doing these days? I
that's a
don't know.
great question. I know, not coming out with a country album in January, that's for sure.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but yeah. So yeah, and you
Yeah.
can contact us anytime. at our Facebook page at I've Got a Beatles. And what's our email address?
And I've got a Beatles podcast at hotmail or outlook.com. So we're
Yeah.
always happy to hear thoughts, pro or con. And I'll also say I'm going to be getting a copy of the 2002 John Lennon Mind Games CD from a friend of the show, Carl, who
Oh.
is going to gift it to me because I've never heard that one. We talked about it, that a lot of people were raving that was the one to hear before this
Hmm.
recent one. So
Yeah.
I'll
I broke down and got it on record.
you
So I
did, I
got the
know.
vinyl for it. And you know, some
Yeah,
I my game these days is wait for it to go on sale and then maybe snatch it up at that point. But
yeah,
although I was looking at my budget today and maybe I won't be getting Living in the Material World or
yeah.
any of that.
Well, let me ask you then: are you going to be? Should we have a prediction here about the $300 U.S. albums box set? Is that going to go down, or is that just because is that a limited edition one, or I don't know?
Yeah, I can't imagine it that the full box set's gonna sell very well, but because it's such an exorbitant extra price to
Right.
the individual albums. But I wonder if how well those individual like US albums will
Yeah.
sell because they're not I mean I think they're list price 29.99. So one would think at some point maybe some of them will be available for like 24. 24 is about the sweet spot. 19 is
Right.
great. 24 is the sweet spot. The 29.99 is pushing it for a one disc record. And then sometimes you get these, you know, that where like for no good reason because it's half speed mastered or something, it's 39.99.
How about Ringo's EP?
Oh, and then you get Ringo's EPs, which are like, especially the record store day, Ringo and the John Lennon EPs were just, it's like for
Yeah.
4 songs, you're paying like $40.
Yeah, it was
Like,
ridiculous.
yeah, it's a real, not great.
No.
People are like worrying about the price of eggs,
Right, I know.
and then it's like, no, I'll just shell out, $300 for a stupid box set that, you know,
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
need. So, yeah. Anyway,
Well, our next episode will be excited as we always do, we'll digest the Living in the Material World album for a little bit. We don't like to come right out with it the day after it comes out. So
yeah,
that'll be our next episode because we want to look at it and compare those. We like to do A/B comparisons with the original, or maybe that was a 2004 remaster, maybe of Living in the Material World, or 2014. So
yeah,
we'll get into all those details, and Chris will make his usual copious notes on
yeah,
each
yeah,
track, and we'll
that's right.
be back with you to talk about that. So looking forward to it. So in the meantime, go check out. We're going to post some of the covers that Chris mentioned for I Want to Hold Your Hand, and you'll have some fun digging into some of those. If you're in a bad mood, listen to Al Green's. It'll put you in a great mood.
Yeah.
And
Why would anybody be in a bad mood?
I,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I
Has
don't know.
anything happened in this
I
country
don't
in the
understand.
recently? Yeah, I don't know. But anyway,
Yeah,
well,
for sure.
thanks as always for listening, and we'll be back at you soon with Living in the Material World.